Hello and welcome. Very good afternoon. You're watching Mirror Now. I'm Afrida Rahman Ali. We are looking at the issue of the new vaccine candidate announced by yet another US firm by the name of Moderna, this time claiming that it has got 94.5% efficacy, which is above the efficacy rate announced earlier by Pfizer, which was another vaccine candidate, again by a US firm. So this time Moderna became the second US candidate to reveal that their vaccine has got 94.5% efficacy in phase 3 trials. Moderna expects to have about 20 million doses by the end of 2020 and 500 million to 1 billion doses by next year. So those are the claims made by this US firm as of now with regards to a new vaccine candidate with a very high efficacy, the highest that has been announced so far. So that's the important announcement made. But with regards to India, even as Moderna's results came out, sources say that India is in a dialogue with the firm and also other biotech firms like Pfizer, Serum Institute, Bharat Biotech and Zydus Cadila over the progress of the clinical trials being conducted for each of their vaccine candidates and where their vaccine stands in terms of safety, in terms of immunogenicity and in terms of efficacy as well. Besides, of course, the issue of regulatory approvals, which become critical in the case of a vaccine for worldwide use. However, the big question remains is India's infrastructure and logistics enough to handle the dispersal and distribution of a vaccine to make it accessible to the last person on the street? So that's the question we are going to be addressing. But first, let me go across to my colleague Avani, who will help us understand the COVID vaccination challenges. There are some real concerns. Avani, good afternoon. If you can take us through the big concerns that we are looking at, even as we want to celebrate and want to welcome this news about a vaccine having a very high efficacy, we are of course bound to also look inwards and see what is the infrastructure and the paraphernalia available in our country in terms of storage and distribution for effective availability of this vaccine to be made to every citizen.
Well, that's right. In fact, like you pointed out, it is great news that vaccines are now almost ready and efficacy rates are also so high. So that is, of course, the good news here. But like you pointed out, there are certain challenges, there are certain issues and questions that need to be addressed as to how this entire vaccination program is going to be delivered to the entire country and to all of those who perhaps need it. Now, let's look at this question by question and look at these different issues. So first off, the challenge is going to be identifying and prioritizing as to who gets the COVID vaccine first, because that is going to be very important. Will it be based on areas which are densely populated, hotspot areas? On what basis is this priority going to be done is the first big challenge. Now, moving on to the second challenge that we are talking about as far as India is concerned, robust cold chain for storage and transport of the vaccine. And this is now one of the biggest challenges that India is facing in terms of how to ensure that the cold storage part is there. The proper supply chain needs to be done because, for example, the Pfizer vaccine needs to be kept at extremely cold temperatures, and India does not really have that kind of infrastructure. The Pfizer vaccine can only remain in refrigerators, normal refrigeration for only 5 days. Otherwise, it needs to be in negative 70 degrees Celsius kind of temperatures. So that part is something that we need to look at and understand how it's really going to happen. That's the second important point. The third is inclusion of adults in mass immunization programs. That also is something that needs to be addressed as well. Moving on to the fourth point here, absence of a database that can help in tracking recipients. Now, this is something else also that is very important because there needs to be a proper database to ensure that we know who has received the vaccination. For example, some of the vaccines that are in the works right now, 2 doses need to be given. So it's not simply like 1 dose that is given and it's done. 2 doses need to be given, and for that, proper records need to be maintained. So whether that is something that is in place or what needs to be done to ensure that database is there. And finally, the training, deploying manpower that can inoculate India. So training of manpower, deploying the manpower, all of that is an entire process that's very important as far as ensuring that this vaccination program is indeed a success and does in fact reach everybody who needs it. And finally, there is still at this point in time uncertainty as far as pricing is concerned and cost burden to the government, because remember, we've already heard many states go ahead and announce that they are going to make the vaccination free for all, and of course, what is that going to entail in terms of cost to the government? How is it going to be different? How are people who cannot afford it, how will the vaccine reach them? Will the government be bearing the entire burden? So all of those questions still need to be answered here, and that clarity right now is still awaited.
Let me welcome joining us on the show this afternoon, Dr. Rakesh Mishra, who is the director for the Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology, CCMB in Hyderabad. I welcome you to learn out, Dr. Mishra, and really glad to have you on the show today to help us understand few critical issues. I want to know from you that now that we have so many names, right, from Sputnik to Pfizer to Coronil and Covaxin, and the latest name that is now, literally grabbing the headlines is Moderna, because they have come up with a very high efficacy rate. I want to first understand from you, why is Moderna a better bet, if at all you think so, than all the other vaccines and their strengths and weaknesses that we have heard so
far? Thank you for bringing me on this program. And if I understood your question correct, you are talking about the Moderna vaccine, which is now declared its initial results of very high efficacy. And so these are both Moderna and Pfizer are the RNA-based vaccines. Never has any RNA-based vaccine been commercialized yet. So these are something very new. And we know that these are probably safe. They are immunogenic and very high efficiency. But we still don't know a most very important issue, whether how long these vaccines are going to provide us protection. Is it going to be few months? Current data does not indicate anything more than that. They may be good for several months, for several years, but we do not know. So that is a big question that will come only with the time. We cannot fast forward the time. But these are, we should celebrate, we should be happy, but we should not consider that we have reached the end point and everything is solved. We probably will need many more vaccines, and I think in next year several more will come, and some of them should provide long-term protection, including maybe these, and might be easier to take to people compared to RNA-based vaccines.
Right, Dr. Mishra, this is Avni Raja this side. My question to you here is, regarding the prioritization of how the vaccine should be reaching to people who need it. What would be your suggestion as to how should the prioritization be done in terms of distribution of the vaccine?
So there, I think we have understood quite a bit about this virus. So of course, the first set of the people should be healthcare workers who are exposed in the front line, and then second will be people with comorbidities. We know so far the saving grace of this disease has been the asymptomatic and very mild symptoms for a large number of people who are particularly young and otherwise healthy. So we can prioritize based on these criteria which we have learned in past 6-7 months, that older people with comorbidities and people who are exposed as a healthcare workers, this should be our priority. And the rest then depends on the availability. Of course, we are going to go for several years this process. Yeah.
Okay. The other question also that I had, Dr. Mishra, is with regard to the database. And this is something that even Mr. Nandan Nilekani had brought up, saying that, there needs to be some sort of a digitalization as far as distribution of the vaccine is concerned. And because this vaccination drive is going to be very different from the kind of polio drives that we've seen in the past. And especially in some cases, it requires 2 doses as well. So this is going to be a completely different scale of vaccination drive that is going to be carried out. What is your response to this aspect of it?
I think this is the most important point you have raised, and I think this is going to be a biggest gain. I would say even bigger than the vaccine, that we should have a database. We should be able to follow different vaccines. We are right now seeing some results. Our population may respond differently. We should be able to follow who has responded, who are falling sick or any other thing. And we already have Aadhaar card system. We should be able to link to that. This is one major thing, major challenge for a country of this size, to having a database of all the people and keeping their certain health aspect, particularly in these kinds of situations or for epidemiology. That will go a long way. I think I'm sure the government will be considering of creating such a database which will link to other things, and we should be able to follow individuals, how they are responding to the vaccine, how many people are not falling sick for 1 year, for 6 months, for 3 months, what is their genetic background, what is their other comorbidity. So that is the information is going to go a long way for us. So I think sufficient resources should be allocated for database which will be useful beyond this disease. So that is very important point you raised, and that will be a big change in our healthcare system once we have such a database.
Right. And the other part, of course, that you were just pointing out as well is with regards to those who have comorbidities or, elderly people, pregnant women, all of these are vulnerable categories. When we talk about vaccination drives such as this one, where there is obviously no long-term studies on the long-term effects of these kind of vaccines, how does one how would the government then go about determining whether it should be given out to these vulnerable categories or perhaps wait for some more time? How does that work?
Well, if you can afford to wait, you can. That will depend on many things: availability, how much of the cost. At the same time, of course, the question will come. Imagine the vaccine gives protection only for 6 months or 4 months. Should we spend so much of money and so much effort just for 6 months? Isn't mask better option than that? And we have, of course, survived the worst period probably of this thing. So that depends upon how is the affordability. If it is going to be RNA vaccine and it will going to need -80 cold chain, lots of other logistic will come into play. So it is a multifactorial thing, and many things will play out to see what final decision who and when to be vaccinated. And all of these are 2-dose vaccines. So, which is a very big issue, that you have to find a person after 21 days or 28 days and give the vaccine. Otherwise, the whole effort goes into waste. So, it is very challenging. Remember that never in the history, whole population, including adult, has been gone through any vaccination thing. Even the children, when we have to vaccinate, we face so much of problem. We have to use so many resources. Whole population is a very different thing, and we are going to learn a lot from this.
All right, Dr. Rakesh Mishra, thank you so much for joining us and sharing all of that perspective. Some very important and crucial points that Dr. Mishra has raised, and obviously a lot of questions still need to be answered, which will happen as we go along.